and welcome to Lutherans Alive. This is the program that seeks to tell the stories of Lutheran Christians and their ministries here in Southwestern Pennsylvania. We believe that God has done wonderful things for us and that He's doing wonderful things through us. I'm Pastor Tony Schneck, host of the program today, and we're very thankful to have with us Janet Montelaro. And Janet is both a member of and on the staff of Trinity Lutheran Church, Wexford, on Brant School Road. Janet, welcome today.
Thank you for having me.
We're very glad to have you. Thanks so much. And tell us a little bit now, before we get to what it is that you're doing now at Trinity, give us a little bit about your own story, you and your husband, growing up, being originally from the great state of Louisiana. Can you
That's correct.
Can we start there?
We had quite a journey. We both went to college together at Louisiana State. And after that, we spent time in graduate school at the University of Wisconsin. We adopted our first child in Wisconsin, and moved to North Carolina for my husband's postdoc, at which time I spent time working in the church. We were both Roman Catholic. We grew up in pretty devout Catholic families, and we remained Catholic throughout that time of schooling. And in the early 80s, my husband's father became very ill, and we decided to move back to Louisiana for a while and be with the family. It was during that time, interestingly enough, that we just, I guess, had a faith experience. We were still Catholic and worshiping in the Catholic Church. And on the campus, we met a pastor, a Lutheran pastor, who invited us, through some of our social justice work we were doing, to come and worship with a small group of Lutherans who were there at the time. It was strange looking back on this because his name was Pastor Steve Goodwin, and I think he was originally a business person in Britain and had a change of career later, so we were sharing our stories with him. And during worship one day with them, we came home and talked about perhaps joining that church, which we did. He gave us instruction, and we converted to Lutheranism in the mid-'80s.
Well, it's testament to the power of a simple invitation.
Yes, it was.
Not that we're in the business of, quote-unquote, stealing people from other churches, but right. For whatever reason, that pastor was moved by the Spirit to extend an invitation to you, an invitation which seemed good to you and your husband, and you took him up on that, and here you are, years later, an active and faithful participant together with your husband in our Lutheran church. And now tell us again, you and your husband were doing your education in what fields?
He's in biochemistry, and mine was in English literature. And I received the PhD in English literature in the early 1990s, and I taught both at Louisiana State, Southern University, and the University of Pittsburgh.
Wonderful. But you and your husband were led eventually here to come to this area, and it seems that you've had a bit of a career change.
Yes. Now
being on the staff of Trinity Wexford, as your title officially is lay minister.
That's correct. I was hired in 2006 after I quit teaching to be a full-time lay minister at Trinity. Pastor Fred Schenker is the pastor there, and he suggested that I go into the training program to become an associate in ministry. So I did do that course through the Select program online, and continued to make progress in that, and was then installed as an associate in ministry officially at Trinity in 2006.
And some of our viewers may or may not be familiar with that phrase or with that title, associate in ministry.
Right.
Years ago in the church, it's my understanding that it used to be called lay professionals.
Right.
But you are rostered on the list of leaders of our Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. Could you say a few more words perhaps about what it means to be an associate in ministry, what that title sort of means?
Yes, I think as lay minister, when I was first hired, I was just an employee of that particular church, Trinity Evangelical in Wexford. As I began to study to become a rostered minister, that I explained to people that means that I'm officially rostered in the Evangelical Lutheran Church, that I'm officially recognized as a lay professional in the ELCA, and that associate in ministry is just a wonderful preparation theologically and professionally to serve in many ways in the ELCA.
So you receive some of the same courses and same training, similar training that the pastors receive.
Yes, I didn't go to seminary for 2 or 4 years, but I did study topics like Old Testament, New Testament, evangelism, preaching. There were several courses that we did our own kinds of research on and papers on, and it was just very fulfilling. And we were actually in conversation in our class with people all over the United States who would call in and have phone conferences, and we would talk about each other's writing and work. It was really dynamic, and I enjoyed every bit of it.
Good. Yeah. Good. Did you have a favorite part of that training, or a favorite class, or what was the most enjoyable thing about that?
The evangelism class was wonderful because it took us through all dimensions of outreach, what justice means, also what does it mean to minister to people who are visitors in your church, how to invite people into the life of the congregation. It just had more facets than I ever realized under that one title, evangelism.
And what a unique perspective you have in that you and your husband were ones who were invited.
Yes, we were.
To be a part of a Lutheran congregation, a Lutheran community, and were welcomed by a pastor, and I'm assuming by others in the congregation as well.
Yes.
Who helped incorporate you into the life of that community.
Yes, and what was so strange was the congregation we first joined was just a very small group of people. It was not a large ministry at all. It was an adjunct of a local parish, a Lutheran parish. So the campus presence wasn't that large, and we were just part of that and nurtured in that for a short time before we moved here to Pennsylvania in the 1990s and joined another Lutheran church up here.
And again, as I said a little bit earlier, not that we're in the business of stealing folks from other churches, but if folks don't have a strong connection for whatever reason, and I'm not sure what your connection had evolved into at that time for you and your husband Ron, but you know, for whatever reason, the time must have been right, and I'm sure there was some discernment that took place at that time.
And I don't think the connection that we had to Catholicism was necessarily at an end so much as joining the Lutheran Church was more of a progression for us. We had, ever since we were married, we've been involved in justice work, in outreach, and in marriage education. So we had an active life in the Catholic Church. The last thing we had done in the Catholic Church was the Catholic Charismatic Movement, which was a really joyful group of prayerful people. So it wasn't that we were disillusioned or had lost any kind of dynamism for our faith. It was just like a natural evolution when we joined the Lutheran Church.
Sure. We're going to take a short break,
Sure.
if that's okay right now, and we'll continue our conversation here on Lutherans Alive right after this.
Okay.
Welcome back to Lutherans Alive. We continue our conversation with Janet Montelaro, who serves on the staff as an associate in ministry at Trinity Lutheran Church, Wexford. And we're glad to have Janet today. How long have you been serving at Trinity Wexford? And in that time, you started to share a little bit earlier about some of your responsibilities. What falls under your areas of responsibility? How many hats do you wear there? We'll start by how long have you been there?
Yes, my husband and I and the family joined in 1992, and I began doing volunteer work in the mid-90s. I was still teaching English at the time at the University of Pittsburgh. When I finished teaching, I began to become more active at the church. Also with Glade Run, I served on their board for a while, even before I was hired. I have a great love for the work Glade Run is doing with children, and joined at Trinity the community ministry program. After I was hired in 1996, I began to work in a lot of areas at Trinity, training Stephen ministers, continuing to educate them and recruit more Stephen ministers, helping people who were at home or homebound, visiting to bring communion, and raising up other lay people to visit people at home. So we have a ministry at Trinity called Spiritual Companions, and we help regular lay people like myself go to homes and visit and just befriend people who may be lonely or just in need of contact from the church on a regular basis. I also am in charge of our home communion ministry. I help organize small groups. We have currently 3 women's groups at Trinity that I've helped to start and to encourage. I lead Bible studies. I have an evening women's Bible study, and I teach one on Sunday with another lay person in our church. That's such a joy. And I preach once a month and do a host of other things as needed.
It sounds like you are involved in many of the caring ministries.
Yes.
At Trinity, and outreach ministries. The Stevens ministry, as I understand it, is a caring ministry. A lot of listening. Lots
of listening, reflective listening, walking a difficult journey with someone throughout an illness, or if a person has experienced unemployment or personal difficulties, to be with that person throughout that difficult time as they journey back to stability.
And it's nice to hear, too, that there is an outreach, as is the case in many congregations, an outreach to those homebound, shut-in members,
yes.
which typically pastors do a lot of the visiting of the shut-ins,
yes.
but also to have that supplemented by caring lay folks who also extend the care of the congregation. That can be something extra wonderful, and I'm sure it's been very rewarding.
Yes, I'm on a personal crusade to get rid of the term shut-in because I feel that it doesn't really describe the people we know who are at home. They need to go to the doctor. They need to go out shopping. Sometimes they can't leave home because they don't have transportation. So that's why I'm trying to connect more lay people with people who are homebound, because they need to get out as well. And sometimes it's nothing more than going and maybe helping them water the garden, plant a few plants, just sit and have conversation or coffee, take them to the doctor. Sometimes they just need to go to the store, and they enjoy so much getting out, but because of their circumstances, they can't leave home. So I feel really called to, bring their situations to light, and they're all unique.
Yeah. The phrase shut-in, I think, has been used for so many years.
So long, it's hard to root it out.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And I think you raise a good point in
Yeah.
that it doesn't accurately describe a lot of folks who are just in need of some extra care.
That's correct.
And they may not be completely homebound. They may get out from time to time to do things, but it may take a lot of effort, and they may not be able to get to church every week, or they may not be able to get moving very well in the morning to get there.
That's right. That's right.
So, and so they may not be completely homebound, but they perhaps could use just a little bit of extra care or an extra visit now and then. At least that's been my experience.
It's the same here, and we've tried to keep a transport ministry going just for people who need help going to the doctor, which is a different thing than just a companion. So if we look at the complexity of their situation, it becomes apparent that there's many things that just the normal parish can do for people who are confined to home.
Mm-hmm. What are some other things that keep Janet busy? What are some other hats that you wear at Trinity?
Well, I serve on several boards. I have served, I mentioned, on the foundation board at Glade Run, and that helped to, I think, bring a love of Glade Run to our congregation. People are very enthusiastic at Trinity about supporting Glade Run and the needs of the children there. So we support the Garden Symposium every year, the annual dinner, the Christmas program, and anytime there's a need there, like right now they need Bibles for children. So we at Trinity are going to collect those and supply those.
It is such a wonderful ministry.
Yes.
There at Glade Run, and a very necessary one. We've got to care for the children, and those children are coming from some very, very difficult situations, and get a lot of the care that they need at Glade Run, even if it's just for a temporary stay.
Yes.
They're getting some help there, and it's good that our congregations reach out, congregations like yours.
Yes.
And we have a group of folks in our congregation that like to go up and visit one of the cottages that have one of the cottages of girls there at Glade Run, and maybe just have like a Valentine's Day party for them, for example, or something.
Yes.
Like that. These are all things that our congregations can do, and if congregations are looking for a way to reach out and make a difference, those are some ways that it can be done.
Right, and I think the joy of working at Trinity is that many people find doing a project like you're describing, they find it overwhelming to think of doing it by themselves, but working there and helping to coordinate all the people that can make that possible, it's easy to do, and it's a wonderful thing to bring people in the congregation together to have a sense of purpose for one mission.
Wonderful. Sounds like a lot going on. Sounds like you have a lot on your plate, and the congregation at Trinity Wexford is a very active one. We'd like to hear more about that. We'd like to hear more from Janet. We're going to do so right after we take another break here on Lutherans Alive. Welcome back to Lutherans Alive. We're thankful to have Janet Montelaro with us today and thankful for her faithful service to the church, particularly through the congregation at Trinity, Wexford. Janet, you mentioned earlier about the time that you and your husband have spent working on justice issues. Could you say a few more words about that? What issues have been close to your heart, and what issues have you and your husband spent time working on over these years, and what might you be working on now?
When we were first married, we felt very called to do some kind of ongoing outreach together. We were still students, and we lived just down the street from an orphanage in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So one night a week, we would go and have dinner with the children, and we would tutor. So we would spend several hours of our week teaching geography, writing, a little bit of science and math to the students and residents there. And we really loved it. We also worked with Marriage Encounter, and we began to be with people in the church, in the Catholic Church at the time, that were involved in justice issues. One of the interesting things we did when we returned to Baton Rouge in the 1980s, we met Sister Helen Prejean, who was at the time beginning to visit people on death row. So as part of members of Amnesty International, we began to visit death row inmates too. Sister Helen Prejean went on to write about her experiences with death row inmates, and we started visiting there at the same time at Angola Prison. The whole issue of capital punishment was coming back into the legislature there, so as members of Amnesty International and the Louisiana Committee Against the Death Penalty, we would lobby with legislators, write letters, and try to get media attention to the inequities of the death penalty for poor people. It was just an amazing education for us to meet the families of death row inmates and to see the social and economic inequity behind that issue. So I've always had a passion for prison ministry, and at Trinity today, we are trying to nurture a prison ministry by helping with the Pittsburgh jails when they have a need for books, for clothing for inmates who are about to be released, and to help with any kind of projects that the jail chaplaincy program is working on.
As I'm listening, I'm remembering the words of Jesus and in other places in Scripture where we are called and urged to care for orphans,
yes,
widows,
right,
the sick, in prison,
yes,
those who are poor. You've covered just about all of those, I believe, in our conversation today.
Matthew 25.
Exactly. Precisely.
Yeah.
Precisely. And we need to keep that in mind as a church. We really do. And you're to be commended for that work, and the folks that are working with you, and Ron and the others at Trinity who continue the ministry that Jesus started so many years ago. So these are the things that fuel your fire.
Yes. And you're always worried when you bring up prisoners. People sometimes, you're afraid they're going to be offended or ask, what does this have to do with church? But it has everything to do with being followers of Jesus Christ. Jesus always picked the outcast, the least likely people, not powerful or influential people. Jesus went to those who were on the margins of society, and he preached the good news to them. And what's wonderful is when you begin to talk about this, especially grounded in our Gospels, to people in our parishes, you see a light come on, you see an understanding, and a growing interest in these areas. And that's one of the beautiful joys of working in the church, is it opens a whole dimension that you never thought would touch people so deeply.
These, I can tell, these are things that are important to you. These are great joys to be able to serve in that way. Any final thoughts about what it is that gives you the most joy of serving in the church?
I just take great pleasure, and I have just an unquenchable thirst to just meet people where they are, to talk to them about how God is present in their lives, especially if people feel burdened or overwhelmed, to remind them that God is here. God suffered like us, the way we suffer. God met us in Jesus Christ, and that there is hope if you feel discouraged and if you feel neglected or overlooked. God is still there, and it's just a wonderful thing. I never tire of meeting people where they are and inviting them into a deeper walk with Christ.
It's a wonderful way to close our time together today, in that we are God's hands and feet, the hands and feet of Christ in the world today. He's still doing wonderful things through us.
Yes.
Janet, thank you so much
for
being here today.
Thank you, Pastor.
And thank you for being with us on Lutherans Alive. We know that from wherever you are watching, whether it's in Wexford or from wherever else, there is a Lutheran congregation in your neighborhood, near your neighborhood. We'd be pleased to welcome you. Won't you come and worship with us? Won't you come see us next time on Lutherans Alive?